As they rounded a bend in the path that ran beside the river, Lara recognized the silhouette of a fig tree atop a nearby hill. Though the weather was hot and the days were long, the fig tree was in full leaf but not yet bearing fruit. Soon, Lara spotted other landmarks. An outcropping of limestone beside the path that had the silhouette like a man's face. A marshy spot beside the river where the waterfowl were easily startled. And a tall tree that looked like a man with his arms upraised. They were drawing near to the place where there was an island in the river, and the island was a good spot to make camp, so they would sleep on the island tonight. Hello there, this is going to be a summary of the first chapter of Steven Saylor's historical fiction novel of ancient Rome, Roma. I'll try to summarize to the best of my abilities and keep in all the interesting parts, as well as read in some excerpts from the book here and there, because sometimes you just need to hear the author's words. So hopefully you enjoy, and we will see if this is a series worth continuing. But as for now, we start the story in my favorite period of Roman history, if you can even call it that, around 1000 BC, before there ever was a Rome, or even the idea of a city on 7 hills. It's known that this area was inhabited by human beings, and that there is archaeological evidence of human beings and a human settlement, long before the supposed founding of the city of Rome. But for now, we begin our story with a woman named Lara. Our story begins with Lara and her people walking along a path that has been there for as long as anybody has ever known. She and her people are salt traders, and they make a living by collecting and refining salt from the sea, and then traveling with it into the foothills, where they traded it amongst the other people living in small villages scattered about the land for various other goods that they couldn't acquire themselves. And this is how life was for Lara. One continuous journey from the salt beds near the sea into the foothills, and then back again, over and over. It's on one of these trips back up into the hills where we learn about Lara's favorite place to stop on this journey. And that place is an island in the river where her people would camp overnights if they were ever in the vicinity of the island. It's also here that we are introduced to Lara's father, Larth, who can perceive the different noumena around him. The noumena are what they call spirits, like the spirit of the trees or the spirit of the river would just be the noumena of the river or the trees. And it's because of these abilities that Larth is the leader of the group. It's also here that we learn that Lara is his only surviving child of 8, and that Lara's mom actually passed away giving birth to Lara, so she is very, very important to him. And he really wants to see Lara have children so that he can be one of the very few men at this time that get to see their own grandchildren. And Larth believes that because he's always respected the various noumena, that's the reason he's still healthy and has a chance to do so. Now, as Larth is thinking in his head about the nature of different things, a deer that was drinking at the river gets startled and bolts up the banks, only for it to stop right in front of them, where we are introduced to the third character here, the hunter Poe, who skillfully throws a spear right into the side of the deer, and then runs up to him and finishes it off. And with a cheer, the small group celebrate because now, instead of fish for dinner, they'll have some red meat. As the group nears the riverbank and the place where they leave their rafts tied up along the shore, they notice that only 2 of the 3 rafts are there, and the third one is already at the island, where, from across the river, Lara makes eye contact with a stranger none of them have ever seen before. This stranger's name was Tarquetios, and he and his 2 other companions turned out to be skilled metalworkers from a faraway place returning back home along a path that crossed the salt traders, and it's just that this was the first time the 2 groups had ever come across each other and been at the island at the same time. Larth invites the men to join them for some venison that night for dinner, and they accept. And it's while at this feast around the fire that Tarquetios and Lara begin to become closer, to the dismay of Poe, but to the delight of Larth, her father. After dinner, the metal traders have gone back to their camp on the other side of the island, and Larth's people have gone to sleep. He stays up a little bit later watching the fire, and it's here where we are introduced to the most reoccurring character of the entire series, Fascinus.
Larth blinked. The flames, which had dwindled to almost nothing, suddenly shot up again. Hot air rushed over his face. His eyes were seared by white flames, brighter than the sun. Amid the dazzling brightness, he perceived a thing that levitated above the flames. It was a masculine member, disembodied, but nonetheless rampant and upright. It bore wings like a bird and hovered in mid-air. Though it seemed to be made of flesh, it was impervious to the flames. Larth had seen the winged phallus before, always in such circumstances when he stared at a fire and entered a dream state. He had even given it a name, or more precisely, the thing had planted its name in his mind, Fascinus. Fascinus was not like the noumena that animated trees, stones, or rivers. Those noumena existed without names. Each was bound to the object in which it resided, and there was little to differentiate one from another. When such noumena spoke, they could not always be trusted. Sometimes they were friendly, but at other times they were mischievous or even hostile. Fascinus was different. It was unique. It existed in and of itself, without beginning or end. Clearly, from its form, it had something to do with life and the origin of life, yet it seemed to come from a place beyond this world, slipping for a few moments through a breach opened by the heat of the dancing flames.
After receiving a vision of Fascinus, Larth knows what must be done. So he goes to Lara and tells her to go to him, Tarquetios, and lay with him. Now, Lara's been wanting the D ever since she laid eyes on him across the river, so she jumps right up and heads over to the other camp and spends the night with Tarquetios. In the morning, Lara is back in camp, but Larth can tell the deed has been done. And before they head out, he tells Poe he wants him to return to the spot that he killed the deer yesterday, because they forgot to wash the path of blood and debris, and Larth doesn't want to offend the noumena of the river and the woods by leaving blood on the trail. But when he tells Poe to go back and clean it, Poe questions him, which throws Larth aback, since Poe has never spoken back to him like that before. And as he's about to berate Poe, the metalworkers show up again, and Tarquetios makes a huge offering of a finely wrought iron spear tip, asking for nothing in return, which he fastens to the end of Poe's spear, who actually doesn't seem very happy about it, and seems to dislike the metal traders. A little while later in the day, as the two groups are getting ready to depart from the island and never see each other again, Tarquetios takes Lara aside, and they each give each other a parting gift. Lara gives him a small clay vessel filled with pure white salt, and Tarquetios gives Lara an amulet he was wearing around his neck. Now, it doesn't look like anything besides a clump of metal, but Lara has never seen such a heavy, pure, yellow metal like the one Tarquetios gave her, and she could see in his eyes how much it meant to him. And she also had no way of knowing of the other gift that he had left with her, the new life forming in her womb. Now, into the evening now, as the sun is setting, and the group had already set out from the island, Larth remembers the task that he gave to Poe to go and clean up the path where they had skinned the deer, So he asked Poe if he had done it yet, and without giving him an answer, Poe answers with his eyes. So Poe lets the group pass him and turns back, and starts jogging back down the path towards the island. Now, as the sun is setting, the group is setting up their next camp for the night, and Poe returns, and Larth is curious as to why the young man took so long, and also as to why he's so clean. Poe answers that he felt the blood of the deer on him, and that he just got a little bit lost after cleaning up at the hot springs, and that's why he took so long. But Larth is old and wise, and feels something is wrong. So he lets Poe go and calls for Lara, and tells her to follow him to the top of this hill, where he knew from past trips you could see a good distance from the top. Now, he's not as young as he used to be, so he tells Lara to use her eyes and look back in the direction of the island, and asks her to tell him what she sees. And Lara says she sees water and trees and hills, and a big group of what looks to be vultures circling the island. That night, as the rest of the group was sleeping, Larth stayed awake again, stealthily taking Poe's spear from his side as he slept. Larth inspects it under the firelight and sees that his suspicions were right. He returns to Poe, standing over him, and presses the spear tip into the neck of the young man.
Poe stirred, gave a start, then was instantly awake. A bead of blood appeared around the spear point pressed to his neck. He gasped and gripped the shaft with both hands, but Larth exerted all his strength to hold it steady. "Speak in a whisper," he said, not wanting to wake the others. "Remove your hands from the spear. Put your arms at your side. That's better. Now tell me the truth. All three of them, or only Tarquetios?" For a long time, Poe did not answer. Larth saw his eyes flash in the darkness and heard his ragged breathing. Though Poe lay very still, Larth could feel the quivering tension of the youth's body transmitted through the shaft of the spear. "All of them," Poe said at last. Larth felt a great coldness descend upon him. Until that moment, he had not been sure of the truth. Their bodies? In the river? My oldest friend, fouled with blood, thought Larth. What would the Newman of the river think of him and his people now? "They'll flow to the sea," Poe said. "I left no trace." "No. At least one of the bodies must have grounded on the riverbank." "How can you know that?" "Vultures." Larth could picture the scene. Blood in the water, a corpse amid the rushes, the vultures circling overhead. Larth shook his head. What a hunter the boy must be, to stalk and kill 3 men. And what a fool. Could the people afford to lose him? Could they afford to keep him? It was in Larth's power to kill him here and now, but he would have to justify his action to the others. More than that, he would have to justify the action to himself. At last, Larth sighed. "I know everything you do, Poe. Remember that." He lifted the spear point from the youth's throat. He let the spear fall to the ground. He turned away and went back to his place by the fire.
That night, except for the vultures, whose gullets were stuffed with carrion, the little island in the river was deserted. That was the last time, as long as Larth was alive, the salt traders ever stayed on that little island in the river. As time passed, Lara gave birth to a son, and was eventually wedded to Poe, who took the child as his own. Lara's memories of the night with Tarquetios became more and more like a dream, and instead of thinking of Tarquetios as the father, she began to believe that it was Fascinus who came from the fire that night and impregnated her. And as the amulet and the story was passed down, the true origins of the amulet and the Panarii were lost. Like Lara's memories of Darketios, Larth's warning to never camp on the island again because of the shades of the dead was forgotten, and the salt traders eventually returned to camping there. Still, the island and the surrounding area remained nothing more than a stopping place. Deer, rabbits, and wolves roamed the 7 nearby hills. Frogs and dragonflies dwelled in the marshy lowlands between the hills, while birds passed overhead and saw below them no sign of human occupation. Elsewhere in the world, men built great cities, made war, consecrated temples to gods, sang of heroes, and dreamed of empires. In faraway Egypt, the dynasties of the pharaohs had already reigned for millennia. The Great Pyramid of Giza was more than 1,500 years old. The war of the Greeks against Troy was 200 years in the past, and the taking of Helen and the wrath of Achilles had already passed into legend. In Israel, King David had captured the old city of Jerusalem and made it his capital, and his son Solomon was building the first temple to the god Yahweh. Further to the east, migrating Aryans were founding the kingdoms of Media and Parsa, forerunners of the great Persian Empire. But the island in the river and the 7 nearby hills remained unsettled by men and overlooked by the gods, a place where nothing of particular importance had ever happened. Thank you guys very much. Whoever here is still here, yeah, for making it through, listening to me talk for that long. I know I don't have the best voice for this or anything. In my opinion, it's actually kind of annoying, but I really do like this story, and I really hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, have a good one.